HIMS and HERS health is showing signs of strength, even though it has failed to hold internal levels of support that would have allowed the structure to extend even higher, even more directly. Today I will share with you the exact setup that I'm tracking, the structure, the count, the levels of support that we really should be holding for this pattern to remain reliable, as well as the levels of invalidation we certainly do not want to see broken, as doing so would put the integrity of the entire structure at considerable risk. Welcome to the trade setup, and in the case of this stock, we are looking at quite a few options, to be honest. In the case of the larger time frame, we have been tracking various different scenarios, and to be honest, none of them really have strong evidence to suggest the reliability of these patterns. None of them even strongly suggest with high preference continuation to higher prices, but we have the capability, right? We have the technology. We can track this as an APC pattern, and even then it can push higher. We could track it as a series of 1-2 setups. Even then, it can still work out. It can form even a pretty generous move up, but in the end, we will not find the necessary information within those structures. I could even still be looking for the fifth wave to still form in the case of this stock and then have a leading diagonal complete. But in the end, we will not have any strong evidence that this stock is going to manage to extend directly higher from a larger time frame perspective. We will have to look at a smaller time frame. And unfortunately here, we have the strong suggestion that this pattern, this correction, is not quite complete. It could be very close to this being the case, but as it stands right now, I am looking at 3 waves down, except within this as a wave C, I do not see a 4th and a 5th that would strongly suggest the pattern is complete. We could track different corrective patterns, but none of them show high clarity in terms of the developed pattern. None of them show a clearly full count within the correction, so we still have to look for the relevant levels of resistance, and we have to look for confirmation or maybe setups within the smaller time frame. Now, in terms of levels of resistance, we have already broken them up to the 61.8% retracement, where the resistance levels we were watching. We had gotten the initial break above it, but it hasn't been a sustained break. So there was a high chance that it would see extensions lower still. There was still substantial risk in the case of this stock to get rejected, even though it has seen the brief break above it. Well, today this changes a bit because we have gotten the second break above the levels of resistance, which is already greatly improving the odds of having a bottom in. It's already improving the odds of seeing the breakout, but it is still a bit early. I would actually still like to see a break above the previous swing high around $39 for this to become an even more realistic outcome. As once that happens, we would also develop a more reliable pattern in the case of this structure. Potentially this 5-wave move up I'm sharing here in yellow. I will actually show you a different path as well. But it would also extend once more beyond the top of a supposed wave 4 within this structure, where this would work out into a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. And this would improve the likelihood that a bottom would be in. Now, to be fully clear, in the case of diagonal patterns, which is what I have to track in this move down to even have levels of resistance to watch out for, but for these structures, it's not going to be an automatic failure if it reaches the territory of a supposed wave 1. Yes, it is possible, and sometimes does happen to even see a break above the 61.8% retracement and still see the pattern work out eventually. Now, if you ask me, the probabilities are already much lower for this to really happen. I do favor that a bottom is in, and that will strongly improve once we break above the previous swing high at $39. And one path to do so is this scenario in white, where I'm tracking a potential wave 1 up within what could even be an initial 5-wave move to the upside, a 3-wave correction within a wave 2, and this could be my wave 3. The ideal target for this wave 3, I have already shared this with you, would be the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. Right around $69 into the resistance area that I have communicated earlier, and if this is indeed to be a wave 3, it would likely reach that level. Waves 3 tend to reach the ideal target. It's not every single time that they do, but most often. If it really is a wave 3, this target will be reached. Now, Within the internal structure, I am looking for an impulse within this scenario. Unfortunately, even the structure we have from the current lows isn't showing the most clear pattern, the most reliable one, and actually has quite a few options, which means we need to have alternative counts to consider. So within the smaller time frame, this idea of a 5-week move up in yellow remains a possibility, but it may not be my preferred one. Within this structure, I have been looking for this internal wave tree to extend even higher, and if it is only this yellow pattern that is developing, we wouldn't be able to reach the expected targets within the larger wave tree within one additional high in this yellow wave 5. This would present an issue, and if this is to materialize, the options that would be then available would track an ABC, a 1, 2, 3 within a leading diagonal, and then we would get a 4th and a 5th to complete the pattern, or something even more bullish, a 1, 2, the same white scenario, but then another 1, 2 here, actually still the same scenario, but then this would have been another 1, 2, and right now we would expect an explosive move to the upside that would well exceed any expectations we would even have for this white wave tree. This is actually my preferred scenario to see work out in the case of this stock. I do see momentum building up and the structure is developing something promising. Now, the thing about this path, this idea, is that it is extremely fragile. Within this path, we actually need to hold extremely high levels of support. We cannot even see a reset within the current correction. Most likely, if we will actually see a reset, a push below $33, we would have already formed too large of an extension, too large of a correction within this as a wave 2. It would be out of proportions with what I am tracking within the structure, and the momentum would be heavily damaged, even more than when it has broken the trend that I have been initially tracking that would have allowed me to even favor continuation directly higher within this yellow wave 5 before seeing the larger reset. So we are looking for this to remain a possibility, and within the smaller time frame, we have actually reached perfectly the first level of support. We have seen the reaction from that very first level of support, and not seeing a deep retracement was one of my requirements for even looking for a potential push to even higher prices. Now, I do want to warn you, the trend line used to serve us as support, right? It has seen 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 either rallies or relief rallies. Now that we are testing it from below, the risk of getting rejected at this level is not something that doesn't often lead to a potentially quite strong decline. I'm not predicting this would happen, but I'm watching out for such a possibility. Now, I promised you that we would be looking at the invalidation levels. Typically, I would only look at the latest swing low. So in the case of this structure, it would be around $34.40. And this should generally be enough. But since this is within such a small time frame, it's not entirely uncommon to see a slightly distorted pattern. It is possible to see a leading diagonal build in the case of these structures, in which case we might even see a slight dip below this last swing low. A highly unlikelihood event in my opinion, but it is something to consider. If you're a person who definitely wants to allow the widest range of possibilities within your trades, the consideration to maybe allow even a dip below this last level of support might not be in vain. Most often, it will be the case that we should not even see a break below the 50% retracement, which is exactly what I'm going to track in the case of this structure, as I could be looking for a 5-week move to the upside to emerge in this path, in which case I would be watching the levels of support for a potential wave 4, and based on the latest price action, these would extend down to $35.80. Typically, the break below the 50% retracement, $35.80, would already be a pretty strong, a pretty healthy indication that this setup is going to fail, that we are going to see much lower prices, a much larger decline. On the flip side, if you're the type of person to want to get out as soon as you get a decent enough indication that the structure would be failing, the 50% retracement would be a very decent level to watch. I do want to warn you in that case, however, it is still possible for this structure to be building a series of 1-2 setups, in which case we might see a dip below the 50% retracement, as the levels of support we would need to consider in the case of such an interpretation would extend down to the 78.6% retracement, which sits at $35 instead. Now, as this would be within a very nested wave tree, I would certainly not even expect that level to be reached, and already if we get a sustained break below the 61.8% retracement, it would be a pretty grim warning sign, right? So we now have the plan to consider depending on your preferences. Next thing to watch out for. We have just talked about the levels that everyone needs to watch depending on their preference. And in the case of this structure, I would like to highlight that the extension to lower prices would unfortunately very likely lead to a failure of both the hyper bullish white scenario that we are tracking here within the small time frame that would lead to a potentially quite strong and explosive move, as well as the fifth wave in yellow that would only require one additional high, as the proportions within this as a wave 4 compared to what we would have had within this as a wave 2 would be a far reach, unlikely to still work out, and it would still need to hold the 50% retracement, which might not be a problem, but the likelihood would already be damaged if this stock cannot generate at least one additional high within this yellow path. I worry for the sake of this structure, and I have to acknowledge the strong risk that it will see much lower prices, potentially quite easily leading to new lows within this entire move down below the previous swing low. And this is about it when it comes to what we can consider in the case of this stock. So if you want even more from me, you can check out the Patreon. But for now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. And if you enjoyed the content and want to support it directly, check out the channel membership. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.